In Boston, they called Lydia Hartwell the family's greatest shame, too plain and quiet to ever matter. So when a wealthy rancher named Samuel Crow wrote from Colorado asking for a refined wife, Lydia's stepmother saw a chance for a truly cruel joke. She would send the unwanted daughter west. But she never imagined that out on the frontier, a man like Samuel would see the one thing her family never could, a quiet strength that refused to break. Now y'all stick with me to the end of this tale and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. It all started when that letter arrived at the Hartwell mansion. Lydia's stepmother, Victoria, took one look at the seal and her mind started spinning. She turned to her own beautiful daughter, Cecilia, and said, "Another one of those desperate Western men." Victoria read the letter aloud. Samuel Crow from the Colorado Territory says he owns 10,000 acres in the biggest cattle operation around. He wants a woman with education and refinement to be his wife. Cecilia finally looked up from her painting. "How awful," she said. "Imagine having all that land and just putting cows on it." But Victoria was already scheming. Her gaze fell on Lydia, sitting perfectly still in a corner of the room. For 12 years, Lydia had learned that being invisible was the safest way to live in that house. "Lydia, dear," Victoria called out, her voice slick as honey. "Come here. We have the most wonderful news for you." Lydia rose slowly, her hands calm, even though she knew that sweet tone always meant trouble was coming. Victoria held out the letter. "It seems we have a marriage proposal for you." Lydia took the paper. She saw the name, Samuel Crow, and the word Colorado. She knew right then that there was a trap hidden in those words. "I do not understand," she said, though she understood it all too well. "Do not be so modest," Victoria said with a sharp smile. "Mr. Crow wants a proper Boston lady, and you are a Hartwell." Cecilia let out a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "Mother, he asked for refinement. He will send her right back on the next train." "Then he can pay for her ticket," Victoria said smoothly. "The deal is to send a Hartwell daughter. It does not say which one." Lydia looked her stepmother in the eye. "You want to send me as a joke?" Victoria's smile widened. "Consider it an adventure." Lydia stood there, feeling the weight of 12 years pressing down. 12 years of being the girl nobody wanted, a constant reminder of the first Mrs. Hartwell. "And if I refuse?" Lydia asked, her voice quiet. Victoria's expression turned to ice. "Then I suppose your father and I will have to discuss the expense of keeping you here. You have no prospects and no money of your own." It was the same threat she had used for years. Lydia's father, Thomas, had long ago vanished into his library, leaving Victoria in charge. Lydia was just an obstacle to be removed. "I will need time to prepare," Lydia said, her voice steady. Victoria smiled, knowing she had won. "Of course, dear. Mr. Crow sent money for your things." For the next 2 weeks, the house was busy with preparations. Victoria picked out Lydia's clothes with a cruel purpose. The dresses were dull, the boots were practical, and the one good coat was a hand-me-down from Cecilia. "We must be practical," Victoria said, holding up an ugly brown suit. "The West is not like Boston." Cecilia added her own small hurts. "Do you think he will keep you?" she asked while Lydia packed. "Or will he realize his mistake right away?" Lydia just kept folding her clothes. She knew what they saw when they looked at her. They saw plain brown hair and quiet gray eyes. But Lydia knew she had a strength and a smartness in Chen that her family had never bothered to see. The day before she was to leave, her father finally came out of his library. Thomas Hartwell looked older than his years, bent over by a life of avoiding trouble. "Lydia," he said, standing in her doorway, "I wanted to wish you well." She looked at the man who had once called her his little philosopher, but had not protected her for 12 years. "Thank you, Father," she replied. He stepped into the room. "Victoria tells me this Mr. Crow is a man of great wealth." "Yes," Lydia said. What else was there to say? He had to know this was a cruel trick. "Your mother would have wanted you to be happy," he said quietly. The mention of her mother, Elizabeth, who had died when Lydia was 10, hit her like a physical blow. Lydia folded her clothes with a sharp crease. "Would she have wanted this?" Lydia's voice cut through the quiet. "Would Mother have wanted you to ship me off just to please your new wife?" Her father, Thomas, winced. "Victoria just wants what is best for this family." Lydia finally turned to face him. "I am this family, Father. I am your daughter." For 12 years, you have let that woman treat me like dirt because you were too scared to stand up to her. Thomas looked like he had aged 10 years right then and there. I thought I was doing the right thing, he mumbled. I needed my father, Lydia said, her voice cracking. I just needed someone to tell me I mattered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. This was your mother's, he said, placing it in her hand. I should have given it to you sooner. I failed you, Lydia. Maybe you can find something better out in Colorado. Lydia just nodded, unable to speak, and he left her to finish packing. The next morning at the train station was cold and gray. Victoria was putting on a real show for the other travelers. Do try to make a good impression, dear, she said loudly. Mr. Crow is expecting a lady of refinement. We have done our best. She made it sound like Lydia was some charity case she was sending off, and the other women on the platform ate it right up. Her stepsister Cecilia chimed in with a smirk. Write and tell us all about the cowboys in the dust, she said, wrinkling her nose. Lydia looked at her stepmother's fancy coat and her stepsister's perfect hair. For the first time, she did not feel fear. She felt something new. Whatever was waiting for her in Colorado could not be any worse than the life she was leaving behind. Goodbye, Lydia said, and that was all. She picked up her trunk and got on the train without a backward glance. The 5-day trip west was like watching the whole country change outside her window. Boston's neat city streets turned into wide-open plains. The passengers changed too, from fancy businessmen to hard-working families and rough-looking cowboys. Lydia kept to herself with the few books she had managed to hide from Victoria. On the 4th day, a woman with kind eyes and strong hands sat across from her. Headed to Colorado to get married? The woman asked. Lydia saw no reason to lie. Something like that, she admitted. The woman smiled. A mail-order bride, then. You do not look the type. What type is that? Lydia asked. Desperate or adventurous, the woman said plainly. You look like you are running from something. She stuck out her hand. I am Martha Henderson. Lydia Hartwell, she replied, shaking it. Let me give you some advice, Miss Hartwell, Martha said. Out here in the West, nobody cares about your fancy manners. They care if you can work and if you are tough. You come out here expecting to be treated like a porcelain doll, you will end up broken. I am not a doll, Lydia said quietly. Martha grinned. Good, then you just might make it. They talked for hours and Martha told her all about life on the frontier. As they pulled into Denver, Martha said, Our men value strength. A woman who can keep her head is worth more than one who can play the piano. Lydia asked, What if you can do both? Martha laughed. Then you will do just fine. Martha gave Lydia her store's address in Denver. If you ever need anything, you come find me, she said. The West is hard, but you do not have to be lonely. Lydia held that piece of paper as she took the smaller train to a town called Crest View. For the first time, she felt a real knot of worry in her stomach. What would this Mr. Crow think of her? Would he send her right back to Boston? But underneath the fear, a new feeling was growing. For 12 years, she had learned to want nothing. But now, seeing the Rocky Mountains rise up ahead, Lydia knew what she wanted. She wanted to matter. She wanted someone to see her for who she truly was. Lydia Hartwell cared more about doctoring a horse's hoof than she did about parties. She believed a person's skill mattered more than their looks. The train pulled into Crest View, a small town with more horses than people. Lydia stepped onto the platform, her heart pounding. She was a day early, and the man she was supposed to meet, Samuel Crow, was nowhere to be found. A young station attendant walked up. Can I help you, miss? When she told him who she was, his eyes went wide. You're Samuel's bride from Boston? He said you weren't coming until tomorrow. The boy could not hide his surprise. She knew she was not what he or anyone expected. The attendant offered to take her to the hotel and send word out to Samuel's ranch, which was about 10 miles away. The hotel owner, a Mrs. Patterson, showed Lydia to a clean, simple room. Samuel's bride, she said with a kind smile. He told us he was getting a refined lady from Boston. Alone, Lydia looked in the mirror. She was just a tired woman in a plain dress. Samuel had been talking about a beautiful, graceful woman, someone her stepsister, Cecilia, was, and she was not. She knew this was a cruel trick. Victoria had sent her as a joke. Lydia unpacked her few things and opened a leather pouch from her mother. Inside was a locket, some jewelry, and a letter. She opened the letter, written just before her mother died 12 years ago. My dearest Lydia, it read, you are enough, not because of how you look, but because of who you are. The world will try to make you small. Do not believe it. Build a life that honors who you truly are. Lydia read it 3 times, her mother's words giving her strength. She put on the locket just as she heard boots on the stairs. A knock came at her door. Miss Hartwell, a deep voice said, I'm Samuel Crow. Lydia took a deep breath and opened the door. Samuel Crow was a handsome, rugged man, weathered by the sun. His blue eyes widened in surprise when he saw her. He was clearly not seeing the woman he'd been promised. Miss Hartwell, he said again, taking off his hat. I know what my family's letter said, Mr. Crow, Lydia stated plainly, and I know what I look like. This is a joke played on both of us. She then told him the whole truth. She explained that her stepsister Victoria sent her as a cruel prank. They thought you'd take one look at my plain face and send me straight back to Boston in shame. Samuel's face grew hard as stone while Lydia explained the cruel joke her family had played. They had sent her to him as a prank, and she was foolish enough to hope. You were deceived, Mr. Crow, she said, her voice steady. You do not owe me a thing. I can leave in the morning. He looked at her, his eyes blazing with a fury that was not meant for her. Those people, he said, his voice tight. Your family. They used you, and they tried to use me for a good laugh. He took a slow breath. I am many things, Miss Hartwell, but I do not stand for cruelty. She nodded. That is why I will go. I am not finished, he said. You told me what they wanted. Now you tell me. What do you want? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in years. I want to matter, she finally said, the words rushing out. I want a life where I am enough. Samuel studied her for a long moment. Can you ride a horse, he asked, changing the subject. Yes, though it has been a while. Can you cook? Adequately. Are you afraid of hard work? No, he nodded. My ranch is 10 miles from here. 3,000 cattle and 20 horses. The work never stops. It is a hard life, very different from Boston. He looked her right in the eye. I do not need a fancy lady. I need a partner. Someone who can stand beside me and build a life in a place that is not forgiving. Lydia's heart pounded in her chest. Why are you telling me this? Because your family sent you here as a joke, but I am giving you a real choice. You can leave or you can come to the ranch and see if this is a life you could want. She was stunned. You are not sending me away. Why would I do that? He asked. You have courage to stand there and tell me the truth. And you have survived years of meanness without becoming mean yourself. That is worth a hell of a lot more than a pretty face. A small bit of hope began to grow inside her chest. I would like to see the ranch, she said quietly, if your offer is real. It is real, Samuel said, all business again. We leave tomorrow morning. Bring what you need for a few days. If you decide it is not for you, I will bring you back myself, no questions asked. He paused at the door. One more thing, Miss Hartwell. Out here, we say what we mean. If you have something to say, you say it. Can you do that? She thought of all the years she had stayed silent to keep the peace. Yes, she said with new strength. I can do that. Good. He nodded once and was gone. Lydia leaned against the door, her legs feeling weak. She had expected to be thrown out, but instead she had been given a choice. For the first time in 12 years, Lydia Hartwell smiled. The next morning, Samuel arrived with 2 horses. He pointed to a gentle-looking mare. Her name is Copper, he said. She has got spirit, but she is patient. Lydia reached out and stroked the horse's warm neck. Copper turned her head and looked at Lydia with big, soft eyes. A weight lifted from Lydia's shoulders. She had forgotten how good it felt to connect with an animal, a creature that did not judge. You were not lying about knowing how to ride, Samuel noted as she mounted the horse with ease. My mother taught me, Lydia explained as they rode out of town. We used to ride together every Sunday. Samuel settled into his own saddle. Tell me about your mother. No one had asked about her mother in a very long time. She was kind, Lydia began, and she was not afraid of hard work. I remember her digging in the garden, her dress covered in mud. She told the gardener that a woman who could not get her hands dirty did not deserve to enjoy the flowers. Sounds like a smart woman, Samuel said. She was, Lydia said, feeling a warmth spread through hers. She told me the world would try to make me feel small. She said I should take up space anyway, that my worth was not for other people to decide. And did you? Samuel asked gently. Not as much as I should have, she admitted. It is hard to remember your own value when everyone around you tries to take it away. True enough, Samuel agreed, guiding his horse over a rocky patch. But you are not in Boston anymore, Miss Hartwell. Out here, the only one who decides your worth is you. The ride to the ranch was quiet. The big sky and the smell of sage and pine filled Lydia with a sense of peace she had not felt in Boston. It's beautiful, she said. Samuel smiled. It can be brutal, too. The isolation gets to some folks. Lydia replied, I felt more alone in a Boston crowded room than I do right here. He gave a real surprised laugh at that. She asked him why he sent all the way to Boston for a wife. He said he was lonely and wanted someone to share his life with. You wanted someone refined and graceful, Lydia said, repeating the words from his letter. I wanted someone with substance, Samuel corrected her gently. And from what I can tell, you have plenty of that. Lydia felt a warmth spread through her chest, unused to a true compliment. Soon they reached a ridge overlooking a valley. Below sat a strong ranch house made of logs and stone. It was not fancy, but it looked like it belonged there, sturdy and real. Barns and corrals stood nearby, with hundreds of cattle grazing in the sun. That's home, Samuel said, his voice quiet with pride. What do you think? Samuel asked, watching her face. The ranch was tucked into a valley, more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. It was not love she felt, not yet. It was wonder. Here, everything seemed to have a purpose. Everything fit. I think it is extraordinary, she finally said. Samuel seemed to relax a little. Come on, he said with a small smile. The men will want to meet you. As they rode down, a tall man came out of the barn. He stopped and stared when he saw Lydia. Sam, he called out, I thought you were not getting your bride until tomorrow. Plans changed, James, Samuel said, helping Lydia down from her horse. Miss Hartwell, this is my foreman, James Thornton. James took off his hat. Ma'am, welcome to the Crow Ranch. His eyes darted to Samuel, and Lydia could read the question in them clear as day. This was not the woman they had been expecting. 4 weeks, then? Lydia looked Mr. Thornton right in the eye. Thank you. I want to see how a real ranch works. Reading about it in a book is one thing, but this is another. James looked surprised. You read about ranching? Lydia explained her father had a large library, and since she was not always welcome in the parlor, she found other things to do. Farming and land management are quite interesting, she said. Samuel coughed to hide a laugh. James, see to the horses. I will show Miss Hartwell the house. James took the reins, still staring at Lydia like she was a puzzle he could not solve. The house was solid. Samuel led her inside to a big open room. It was nothing like a Boston parlor. A stone fireplace stood against one wall with comfortable, well-used furniture. Books filled a whole wall and maps of the ranch were tacked to another. Everything was clean, but it felt lived in. Kitchen is that way, Samuel said, pointing. The men's bunkhouse is out back. There are 4 bedrooms upstairs. You can take the big one at the front. It was meant for, he paused. Well, a wife. Lydia set her wagon down. This house was honest. Nothing was just for show. Everything had a purpose. It's wonderful, she said, and meant it. Samuel seemed relieved. Just then, a woman came from the kitchen. She looked to be about 60, with gray hair pulled back tight and a no-nonsense look on her face. She stopped short when she saw Lydia. So you are the Boston bride, she said, her voice blunt. You are not what Sam described. Mrs. Chen, this is Miss Lydia Hartwell, Samuel said with a tired sigh. Lydia, this is Mrs. Chen. She runs the house. We say what we mean out here, Mrs. Chen said, stepping closer. Are you one of those delicate flowers who will wilt at the first sign of work? In Boston, that kind of talk would be an insult. Here, Lydia found it refreshing. No, ma'am, she said. I am not afraid of hard work, though my skills are better suited for a library right now. Mrs. Chen's eyes narrowed. Can you cook? Yes. Handle blood? The question surprised Lydia. I do not know. I have never had to. You will, Mrs. Chen stated. Out here, being squeamish can get a man killed. Animals get hurt. Men get hurt. Will you faint or will you help? Lydia thought for a moment. I honestly do not know, but I am willing to learn. Something in the older woman's face softened. Fair enough. Are you hungry? I have stew. Starving, Lydia admitted. Then come on, Mrs. Chen said, turning back to the kitchen. Sam, go see to your men. Samuel nodded. Will you be all right? He asked Lydia. I will be fine, she said, realizing it was true. The kitchen was warm and smelled of bread and stew. Mrs. Chen moved with purpose, filling a bowl and cutting a thick slice of bread. Sit, she ordered. The stew was rich and the bread was warm. Lydia ate like she had not seen food in days. Mrs. Chen watched her with sharp eyes. Are you running from something or towards something? She finally asked. Both, I think. Family trouble? Mrs. Chen grunted. Most women who come here alone are running from family trouble. But Sam is a good man. He is honest and works hard. You could do a lot worse. I'm not sure he wants me, Lydia said quietly. I am not what he expected. Life does not give you what you expect, Mrs. Chen said. It gives you what you get. Sam was expecting a fancy lady to make the house pretty. He got you. The question is, what are you? Lydia thought about it. She was not the lady Samuel wanted or the daughter her father wanted. I am someone who wants to be useful, Lydia said at last. Someone who is tired of being decorative. Mrs. Chen gave a short, rare smile. Then you might just fit in here after all. Finish your stew. I will show you to your room. The bedroom was simple and clean, with a large bed and windows that looked out over the valley. Sam built this house 5 years ago, Mrs. Chen said from the doorway. He has been lonely for a long time, but he would never say it. The man works himself to the bone and calls it ambition. Why are you telling me this? Lydia asked. Because this place needs a partner, not a decoration, Mrs. Chen said, her gaze steady. You stay or you go. That is your choice. But if you stay, you pull your own weight. I understand, Lydia said. Mrs. Chen nodded and left. Lydia looked out the window and saw Samuel with his men. She could see the respect they had for him. A knock came at her door. It was Samuel. Miss Hartwell, if you are not too tired, I could show you the ranch. I am not tired, Lydia said, opening the door. They spent the next 2 hours walking the ranch. Samuel showed her the barn and his horses. He explained the challenges of raising cattle, the constant watch for wolves and disease. We lose about 5% of the herd every year, he said, leaning on a fence. It is just the cost of doing business. That seems high, Lydia noted. It is, but we manage. The main thing is keeping the herd healthy. He glanced at her. Most ladies from the East would find this talk dull. Most ladies from the East are taught to find anything useful dull, Lydia replied. That seems idiotic, Samuel said plainly. It is, Lydia agreed. He nodded and led her toward the stables. Out here, being competent is more important than being proper. A woman who can shoot a rifle and dress a wound is worth more than one who can play a piano. A real expert. When they walked in, a big smile spread across his face. Sam, I didn't figure you'd be back so soon. His eyes found Lydia, and that smile tightened just a bit. This must be Miss Lydia Hartwell, Samuel said. Lydia, this is Thomas White Elk. He knows more about horses than any man alive. Thomas walked over, moving with a quiet grace. He had long, dark hair and wore a mix of old-style and new-style clothes. His eyes were kind, but sharp. Welcome to the ranch, Miss Hartwell, he said. Sam told us you were coming to civilize us rough country folks. Lydia's face got warm. Sir, I'm not sure I could civilize anyone. I'm still working on myself. Thomas let out a genuine laugh. I like her, Sam. She's honest. By the time they got back to the house, Lydia's head was spinning. She had learned more in 2 hours than she had in years of reading books. The ranch hands were polite at supper, but you could tell they were curious. Finally, a man named James spoke up. So, Miss Hartwell, what do you think of the place? Lydia answered without hesitating. It's incredible. The work it takes to run this operation is amazing. And the horse breeding program Mr. White Elk told me about is just fascinating. The whole table went quiet. The men looked at each other, surprised that a woman from the city actually understood their work. You really find it interesting? Thomas asked. Lydia looked puzzled. Why would I pretend to care about something I don't? That seems like a waste of everybody's time. Samuel made a choking sound that turned into a laugh. Miss Hartwell doesn't go in for fancy talk, it seems. Careful, Sam, James said with a grin. This one might just tell you when you're being a fool. Well, someone ought to, Mrs. Chen muttered from the kitchen. After that, the talk flowed a whole lot easier. That big Texas sky was filling up with stars. Samuel stood with Lydia on the porch after the men had gone to the bunkhouse. He turned to her and said, Miss Hartwell, what your family did was wrong. Sending you out here like some piece of unwanted baggage. You deserved a whole lot better. Her throat felt tight. He went on, his voice quiet but firm. I think you have been told you are not good enough for so long that you started to believe it. Well, I need you to listen. If you choose to stay, it will not be because I am settling for second best. It will be because I see the good, honest woman you really are. She finally looked up at this man she had just met, who saw more in her than anyone ever had. Why, she asked. Why me, when you were expecting someone beautiful? Because pretty words and a pretty face do not last, Samuel said, plain as day. But a good mind and a strong heart, those things do. You have both, even if you cannot see it yet. Something warm started to grow in Lydia's chest, a feeling she had almost forgotten. I would like to stay, she said softly, if your offer is real. It is real, he promised. Lydia had never been one for sitting still, and the ranch had plenty of work. She spent the next week in the kitchen with Mrs. Chen, learning to cook for a dozen hungry men. Her soft hands quickly grew calluses, but she wore them with pride. She was finally useful. She was finally learning to belong. You are not scared of hard work, Mrs. Chen said one morning, watching Lydia knead dough. A fancy lady from Boston would not last a day here. Lydia just smiled, a smear of flour on her forehead. I was never fancy. That was always the problem back home. Not a problem here, Mrs. Chen grunted. The evenings were Lydia's favorite time. She and Samuel would sit and talk for hours. She learned he was smart and well-read. My mother was a teacher, he explained one night. She said an educated man can see chances an ignorant one will miss. She and my father built this place together. Is that why you wanted a wife, Lydia asked, for a partner? Samuel met her gaze. I see someone who is stronger than she knows. Someone who has been knocked down but never broken. I see someone I could build a life with. Hope, bright and dangerous, bloomed in Lydia's heart. I think I want that too, she admitted. To build something. To matter. You already matter, he said gently. Just then a terrible noise erupted from the yard. Men were shouting and a horse was screaming in fear. Samuel was on his feet in a second, heading for the door. Without a thought, Lydia was right behind him. One of the horses, a mare named Dancer, was bucking wild in the muddy yard. James and Thomas were trying to calm her down, but she was full of panic. Give her room, Samuel yelled, moving down the steps. But the mare reared up, her hooves slashing the air. James stumbled backward and fell hard to the ground. Lydia watched in horror as the horse came down right on top of him. James let out a cry of pure agony. Samuel and Thomas finally got a rope on the mare and pulled her away. Get him inside, Samuel ordered, his face a grim mask. The creek is too high from the rain. No doctor can get here before morning. They carried James in and laid him on the dining table. His leg was broken badly, and his face was pale with shock and pain. Lydia stood frozen in the doorway, her heart pounding. Blood was soaking through James's pants, and his leg was bent at an angle that just was not right. Lydia's stomach turned over. Back in Boston, folks kept ugly things like this hidden away behind a doctor's door. Miss Hartwell, Mrs. Chen said, her voice sharp as a tack, I need you to boil water. Now. That broke Lydia's freeze. She rushed to the kitchen, her hands shaking something awful. She heard Samuel's voice, calm as you please. James, I've got to cut your pants away to see what we're dealing with. It's gonna hurt. James just groaned. The bone's broken clean through, Samuel said, his voice tight. We have to set it before it swells up. Mrs. Chen grabbed Lydia's arm as she brought the hot water back. I need your help, the old woman said. Samuel and Thomas will set the bone, but I need you to hold James's shoulders down. Keep him from thrashing. I cannot, Lydia whispered. I have never. You learn, Mrs. Chen cut in. You learn right now, Mrs. Chen said, her grip like iron, because if that leg ain't set right, James could lose it. We don't have time for you to be delicate. Lydia looked across the room at Samuel. He met her gaze, his blue eyes serious. I need you, Lydia, he said plain and simple. It was not just about holding a man's shoulders. It was about being the kind of woman this place needed. Strong, not just pretty. Lydia thought of her mother's letter. Tell me what to do, she said, walking to the head of the table. A look of relief and something like respect crossed Samuel's face. Hold him flat against the table. He is going to fight it. Ready? Samuel asked, his hands on the broken leg. Do it, James grunted. Samuel pulled. A terrible scream tore out of James's throat. He tried to rise, but Lydia held him down with a strength she never knew she had. Almost there, Samuel grunted. Then it was all a blur. James's cries, Samuel and Thomas working together, and Lydia's own muscles screaming as she held on. Blood was all over her dress and her hands, but she did not let go. Finally, Samuel stepped back. It's set, a clean break. He should heal up fine if we keep it clean. James had passed out from the pain. Lydia let go, her own hands now shaking bad. She looked down at herself, covered in blood and sweat. You did good, Samuel said quietly right beside her. Go on upstairs and get cleaned up. We'll handle the rest. In her room, she washed the blood from her hands. The woman in the mirror looked different. Her hair was a mess and her face was pale, but her eyes were shining with something new. When they needed her, she had not run. She had been strong. Model. Lydia was finally seeing the truth of who she could be, right here in the heart of Texas. A soft knock came at her door. It was Samuel. His clothes were still stained from the trouble, and his face was worn clear out, but his eyes held a kind of wonder. He said, I came to thank you. What you did tonight, that took real grit. Lydia admitted she was terrified the whole time. Being brave does not mean you are not afraid, Samuel told her. It means you do what has to be done, even when you are scared. He told her she had proven herself to everyone, but most of all, he hoped she had proven it to herself. That is when she knew. I want to stay, she said, her voice clear. I want to be your partner and build this place with you. A smile broke across Samuel's tired face, bright as a sunrise. Are you sure? This life is not easy. I am sure, she said. I would rather face 100 hard times here than one more easy day in Boston feeling useless. He reached out and took her hand. His was rough and warm, a working man's hand. Then stay, he said. Be my wife. Yes, Lydia said, and the word was pure freedom. That night she had chosen her own future. She picked a life of purpose over a life of comfort. By the next morning, the whole ranch knew what happened. The men looked at her different now, with a respect she had earned in the heat of the moment. When James woke up, he was weak, but he understood. Lydia brought him some broth. Thank you, he rasped. Mrs. Chen told me what you did. Sam is a lucky man. I thought you were too soft for this country, but you proved me wrong. Lydia just smiled and said, You needed help. I was there to give it. James looked at her with new eyes. This ranch needs a woman like you, he said. Someone strong. In the days that followed, Lydia found her place. She helped Mrs. Chen, she tended to James, and she learned about horses from a hand named Thomas. He told her she was a natural because she treated the animals with respect. Well, they are intelligent creatures, she said, stroking a mare's neck. Why would I treat them any other way? Thomas just grinned. In the evenings, she and Samuel planned their future. They were not strangers anymore, but partners. He told her he wanted a family one day, a real family, to fill up the big quiet of the ranch. A letter from Boston found its way to the ranch, and Lydia felt a cold dread just looking at it. She knew her father's handwriting, even if it seemed a little shaky. Nothing good ever came from back east. Samuel saw the look on her face and asked, Bad news? She did not know yet. Lydia opened it and her whole world tilted. Her sister Victoria was telling everyone back home that Samuel had kidnapped her. She was painting him as a common criminal who had tricked their family and dragged Lydia away against her will. Victoria was stirring up trouble, trying to get federal marshals sent out to arrest Samuel and rescue Lydia. Her father's letter was a warning. He admitted he was too weak to stop his new wife's cruel games. Lydia's hands shook with fury. It was not enough for Victoria to send her away. Now she had to destroy the happiness she'd found. She handed the letter to Samuel. His jaw set hard as a rock while he read. "She's trying to ruin us," Lydia said, her voice tight. "If they believe her lies, they could take this ranch, everything you've built." Samuel spoke the word like a curse. Boston. He said she had to go back to that house, to that family. The thought made Lydia's stomach clench. She had tasted freedom out here, found a real purpose. Going back to being Victoria's unwanted daughter was just not an option. "We have to fight this," she said, her voice firm. "We have to prove I came here on my own, and I am staying because I choose to." For 12 long years, Lydia had swallowed every cruel word to keep the peace. Not anymore. Victoria was counting on her to be that same scared little girl. "Well, she is in for a surprise," Lydia declared. "I am not broken, and I am not afraid." Samuel looked at her with pure admiration. "No, ma'am, you surely are not. What do you need me to do?" "Help me write down the truth," she answered. "Every last detail of Victoria's lies. We will send it to the governor and anyone else who will listen. We will show them you are an honorable man and I am right where I belong." "Her friends are powerful folks," Samuel warned. "They might not listen to us." "Then we will find other folks to listen," Lydia shot back, her mind already working. "The people at the station, the hotel, the train. We will build a case so strong that not even Victoria's money can tear it down." A proud smile spread across Samuel's face. "You are a wonder, Lydia. Remind me never to get on your bad side." "Too late," she said with a small grin. "I have been angry for 12 years. It is about time I put it to good use." They spent that whole evening writing down Lydia's story with care. She wrote about Victoria's cruel setup and the letter that painted her as something she was not. She explained how she was sent west as a joke, meant to humiliate her and the rancher who dared ask for a bride from her family. She wrote of Samuel's decency in giving her a choice and her own decision to stay. Samuel added his side of the story, and they got written statements from Mrs. Chen and a recovering James, both praising Lydia's character. By the time the sun came up, they had a stack of papers filled with the plain, honest truth. Lydia signed her name with a steady hand. "We will send this out tomorrow," Samuel said. "Victoria wanted to play a game with your life. Let us show her how it ends." But Lydia had one more move to make. "I want to marry you, Samuel, and soon." She looked him straight in the eye. "Not just to make our case stronger, but because I choose you. I choose this life, and I want the whole world to know it." He took both her hands in his. "Are you sure about this?" "I have never been more sure of anything," Lydia said. "Marry me, Samuel Crow." His answer was their very first kiss. It was gentle and full of promises they both knew they would keep. In that moment, the old Lydia fell away. She was not a joke or an embarrassment anymore. She was home. 3 days later, they married in the small church in Crestview, with what felt like the entire town there to wish them well. Their wedding was nothing like what Boston society would have expected. There was no big fuss, no fancy guests, just good people from town who had come to care for Lydia. Samuel stood at the altar in his best suit, his eyes locked on her the whole time. The preacher spoke plain truths about partnership and how out here, folks had to rely on each other to make it. When Lydia spoke her vows, her voice rang out clear as a bell. She promised to be Samuel's partner and equal, and then she added something just for her. She would never let fear silence her voice again. Samuel's smile told her everything she needed to know. The town celebrated with them afterward, bringing practical gifts given with real warmth. Martha Henderson, the kind lady from the train, gave her a beautiful handmade quilt. "I knew you'd find your place," she said, giving Lydia a hug. For the first time, Lydia truly felt like she was home. But she knew a storm was brewing back east. Before the wedding, they had already sent word to the territorial governor, letting him know to expect some important mail about false claims made against a Colorado rancher. Now, with the wedding done, Lydia got to work. She wrote letters to everyone who had shown her kindness, thanking them and making it plain that she was happily married by her own free will. Then, she wrote to her father. It was not the short, polite note her stepmother Victoria always made her write. This was a long, honest letter, one that laid out 12 years of hurt and silence. She told him she was done being a victim and that the cruel joke Victoria played had backfired. She wrote that she had found a good man in Samuel Crow and a good life in Colorado, a life she intended to fight for. She told her father that if Victoria sent the law, they would find a woman who was exactly where she wanted to be, with dozens of folks ready to speak to her good character and free choice. She made it clear that Victoria's lies were about to be dragged into the light. She sent copies of everything, her story, witness statements, and her marriage certificate, to the governor, to federal authorities, and even to a few newspapers. The truth, she explained, was coming out one way or another. Finally, she gave her father a choice. He had failed her for 12 long years, choosing a quiet house over his own daughter's happiness. But now, she wrote, he could do differently. He could stand up to Victoria and tell the truth. She was not holding her breath, but she was giving him the chance. Signing her new name, Lydia Elizabeth Crow, she felt a heavy weight lift right off her shoulders. She had spoken her truth. What happened next was out of her hands. Now we just wait, she told Samuel. He took her hand. Whatever comes, he said, we face it together. The answer came quicker than they figured. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from the governor's office. The governor had looked at everything. He had Lydia's story, Samuel's proof, and statements from the folks in Crestview. And to their surprise, he also had a letter from Lydia's father, Thomas Hartwell. Her father had come through. He told the truth about Victoria's cruel scheme and his own shame in letting it happen. The governor declared the case closed, finding no proof of any wrongdoing. But he also gave them a warning. Victoria had not given up. She was now writing to newspapers and society pages back in Boston, painting herself as a worried mother whose poor stepdaughter had been tricked by a rough frontiersman. She's trying to ruin you, Samuel said. Samuel said, his voice tight with anger, and make me out to be the villain. A fire lit in Lydia's eyes. Then we'll just have to tell a truer story. She spent the next few days writing her own account, not for the law, but for the public. She told of the 12 years of quiet cruelty, of being sent west as a punchline, and of finding a life of real purpose and love. If you publish this, Samuel said quietly, Victoria's reputation in Boston will be destroyed. Good, Lydia replied, her voice firm. She tried to destroy us. It is time she learned that what you do to people matters. She was not sending her story to the high society papers. She was sending it to real newspapers, the kind that cared about the truth. And she was sending it to women's journals, hoping her story might give other women the courage to find their own voice. Samuel pulled her close, proud of the strong woman she had become. And Lydia was not done yet. She sent her story to 8 different newspapers, from the Rocky Mountain News all the way to the Boston Globe. She signed it with her full new name, Lydia Elizabeth Hartwell Crow. Then they just had to wait. Soon, letters started coming in. Editors wanted to print her story. Reporters wanted to interview them. The truth, it turned out, was a powerful thing. Within a few weeks, Lydia's story was being read all across the country. The articles praised her courage and condemned the kind of cruelty she had endured for so long. The fallout for Victoria was swift and terrible. Her high society friends turned their backs on her. Charitable groups asked her to leave. The doors to the fancy parties were suddenly closed. Even her own daughter, Cecilia, found that her family's name was now tainted by the scandal. Letters from women who had similar stories began pouring into the ranch, each one a small victory. Victoria tried to defend herself, of course. She wrote to the papers claiming it was all a big misunderstanding, that Lydia was unstable. But her words sounded hollow and weak. Nobody was buying her lies anymore. After years of using her cruelty like a weapon, Victoria finally found it turned back on herself. Your father wants to visit, Samuel said one evening, reading a letter. He wants to apologize. 6 months ago, Lydia would have been desperate for any sign of her father's attention, but she was a different woman now. What do you think I should do? She asked Samuel. That is your decision to make, he said gently. I will stand by you no matter what. Lydia thought about the quiet, weak man who had let her be hurt for so long, but he had also written to the governor to support her. I will see him, she decided, not to forgive him, not yet, but to let him see the woman I have become. I want him to see what his daughter built for herself. When Thomas Hartwell stepped off the stage in Crestview, he looked older and smaller than she remembered. Lydia stood tall, ready to meet him on her own terms, in her own home. When Thomas Hartwell finally came to visit, things were mighty awkward. He met Samuel and right away said he owed him an apology. I was a coward, he confessed. Victoria made me write those things about Lydia. Samuel just nodded. He said that trying to make things right had to count for something. Thomas saw the ranch and the life his daughter had made. He saw the ranch hands treat her with respect, as a true partner. He realized Lydia was not just some pretty thing in a man's house. She was a force all on her own. That evening on the porch, her father finally spoke the plain truth. I failed you, he said quietly. After your mother passed, I hid from my grief. I let Victoria run our home and run you down. I knew it was wrong to send you here. He told her that her own courage had shamed him into finally doing the right thing. Lydia listened and then gave him her own truth. I can't forgive you yet, she said. The hurt from 12 years is still too fresh. Thomas nodded through his tears. He understood. He was just proud of the strong woman she had become. Lydia looked her father right in the eye, her voice calm but firm. I am disappointed in you, she said, not with meanness, but with a hard-earned truth. You need to be a better man. Thomas looked lost. What does that even look like, he asked. Lydia laid it out plain and simple. First, you divorce Victoria. You show the world that you will not stand by a woman who treats another soul with such cruelty. Then, you use your money to help other women trapped in bad situations. You fund schools and shelters. You turn all that guilt you are carrying into something good. Thomas was stunned. You have really thought about this. I have had a lot of time to think, she said. Mowing things right is not just about saying you are sorry. It is about changing how you act and helping others. After a few days of watching Lydia run the ranch with a quiet strength he had never seen, Thomas sat with her on the porch one last time. I have rewritten my will, he said. Everything is yours. The house, the business, all of it. Victoria will get only what the law says she must, and not a penny more. Lydia just stared at him. This should have been done years ago, Thomas said, his voice thick with regret. You are my daughter. You should have what your mother and I built together. I do not want the money, Lydia said slowly. I have everything I need right here. Then use it to help others, Thomas pleaded. Please, Lydia, let me do this one thing right. She looked over at Samuel, who gave a small nod. The choice was hers. All right, she said, but I want it in writing that this is my inheritance from my mother, not some gift from a guilty conscience. And I want you to publicly support women's rights, just like we talked about. Done, Thomas said without a second of hesitation. And what about Victoria? Lydia asked. His face hardened. I am filing for divorce the moment I get back to Boston. The whole city will talk, but I do not care. They will all know it is because of how she treated you. For the first time in a long while, Lydia felt a weight lift from her chest. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. Her father was finally becoming the man her mother always believed he could be. Thank you, she whispered. The next morning, as his carriage pulled away, Thomas turned back to her. I will keep my word about the reforms, he promised. Lydia leaned against Samuel, watching the dust settle. How do you feel? Samuel asked. Free, Lydia said with a smile. Finally and completely free. Letters from Boston told the story of Victoria's downfall. The divorce was messy and public. Stripped of her money and status, the cruel woman who judged everyone was now the one being judged. Lydia felt nothing at all reading the news. She was already focused on her future. The ranch was thriving. Lydia was no longer the soft Boston lady who first arrived. Her hands were calloused from hard work. Her skin was tanned by the sun. And she walked with a confidence that came from building a life with her own two hands. She was strong, inside and out. The inheritance money arrived in late summer, a very large sum. Samuel looked at the papers. What will you do with it all? He asked. This is enough to build a whole new dream. Lydia looked around at the life they had made. She thought of all the women who wrote her letters, women who felt trapped just like she had. I want to build a school, she said, her eyes shining with purpose. Right here on this ranch, a school for women. We will teach them how to run a farm, how to manage money, how to be doctors to their own animals. We will teach them everything they need to stand on their own 2 feet. Samuel smiled, seeing the fire in her. That is a big, important idea. There are a lot of women out there who need a place like that. I know, Lydia said. I was one of them. If I can use this money to give other women the chance to choose their own path, then it will be the best thing I have ever done. And so they began. Samuel helped design the buildings. Mrs. Chen, their sharp-tongued housekeeper, was excited to teach real skills like medicine and bookkeeping. It is about time women learned something useful, she declared. James offered to teach everyone how to ride and handle cattle. The whole ranch came together, building dormitories and classrooms under the wide Texas sky. They were not just building a school. They were building a place of hope, a place where any woman could come and learn how to be strong, how to be independent, and how to be free. From that strength, a powerful idea took root. Lydia and Samuel decided to build a school, a place for women who needed a second chance. They advertised in papers across the country, and letters started pouring in. They came from widows with no support and daughters being forced into bad marriages. Lydia read every heartbreaking story, seeing her own past in their words. They accepted the first class of 8 women, all from different backgrounds, but sharing the same desperate hope for a new life. When they arrived, Lydia saw her old self in their nervous but determined eyes. "Welcome," she told the women, her voice steady and kind. "You belong here, not because of who your family is, but because you were brave enough to choose something new for yourselves." One young woman asked, "What if we fail?" Lydia smiled. "Then we'll just find another way to teach you. This is not a test. This is a chance to discover how strong you really are." In the weeks that came, the women learned more than just writing and bookkeeping. They learned to speak up. They shared their stories and found they were not alone. They were building more than skills. They were building a future. Lydia did more than just build a family. She built a school right there on the ranch. It was a place for women who had been told they were worthless to come and find their own strength. One afternoon, an old friend, Martha Henderson, came to visit. She looked at all Lydia had built with tears in her eyes. "This is not just a school," Martha said. "You are giving these women the tools to be free." News of the school spread like a prairie fire. Some folks praised it, but others criticized it something fierce. They said she was destroying families by teaching women to be independent. Samuel just laughed at the angry letters. "They are not scared of educated women," he said. "They are scared of losing control." The ugliest words came from a woman named Victoria back in Boston. She wrote to the papers, calling Lydia a bitter woman who was poisoning others against men. Victoria claimed the school would fail and the women would end up lonely and broke. But then a funny thing happened. The very first women who had come to Lydia's school, all scared and broken, wrote back to those papers. Every last one of them told their story. They wrote about the skills they learned, the confidence they found, and the new lives they were building. They proved Victoria wrong, not with anger, but with the simple truth of their own success. The women Lydia taught wrote letters to the papers. They were not angry radicals, just ordinary women talking about how the school changed their lives for the better. Victoria's bitter attack just fell apart against the simple truth. Samuel read the letters, his chest puffed out with pride. "Your students defended you," he said. "They learned to use their voices, and they used them for you." Lydia shook her head. "They protected themselves and what they believed in. That is even better." As summer came on, Lydia felt a wave of dizziness one morning in the garden. She sat down hard, her hand on her belly. She just knew. That night, she told Samuel and watched his face change from worry to pure wonder. "Are you happy?" Samuel asked, his voice soft. "I am terrified," Lydia told him, "and happier than I have ever been." He promised her she would be a wonderful mother. As the months went on, the students watched over her, and Mrs. Chen made sure she ate and rested. "You are growing my grandchild," she said, and that was that. Letters came from her father, Thomas. He was back east, working to help other women, trying to make up for the past. In November, he wrote and asked if he could come see his grandchild be born. To her own surprise, Lydia said yes. Thomas arrived in early December. He told her Cecilia had twin daughters and was finding her own way. He even brought a letter from her, a careful first step toward mending things. Lydia figured she would answer it when she was ready. 2 weeks later, the baby came during a big snowstorm. The labor was long and hard, but Samuel never left her side. When their daughter finally arrived with a strong cry in her daddy's blue eyes, Lydia wept from joy. "Elizabeth," she whispered. "Elizabeth Victoria Crow." Samuel looked at her, confused. After the victory, Lydia said, her voice firm, not the person. She will define that name for herself. When Thomas held his granddaughter for the first time, he just broke down and cried. She looks just like my Elizabeth, he said. The whole ranch celebrated the new life. It felt like a real community. In the quiet moments, Lydia thought about the long road she had traveled. She was sent out here to be broken, a family joke. Instead, she had found a good partner, a real purpose, and a family that loved her for who she was. She had turned all that cruelty into something good. One night, Lydia was rocking the baby by the fire. "What are you thinking about?" Samuel asked her. "Revenge," Lydia said with a small smile. He looked startled. "Not the kind Victoria wanted," she explained. "The best kind. The kind you get by building a life so good that what they did does not matter anymore." Samuel nodded. "That is the best kind there is." Just then a knock came at the door. It was a telegram. The territorial governor was officially recognizing her school. Not only that, they were giving it funding and using it as a model for other schools across Colorado. "It is really happening," Lydia whispered. After that, letters started coming from all over the West. Women wanted her advice on starting their own schools. The school on the ranch kept growing, with old students staying on to teach the new ones. Each woman who left took with her the lesson that she mattered. Thomas kept forwarding letters from Victoria. At first, they were just angry and full of blame. But the last one was different. Victoria wrote that she was supporting herself by sewing. She said she had found pride in doing good work and earning her own keep. It was not an apology, but it was something close. Victoria never did apologize for the hurt she caused Lydia, but she had to admit that being forced to learn real skills gave Lydia something she never had in Boston. The woman could finally stand on her own 2 feet. Samuel asked, "Do you think she has changed?" Lydia said, "I reckon she's starting to understand that being useful feels a whole lot better than just being looked at, but that does not erase 12 years of meanness." They never wrote back. Some doors are best left shut. Their little girl, Elizabeth, grew up strong and happy in the clean ranch air. By her 2nd birthday, she knew all the horses by name. She was her mother's daughter, always asking how things worked. Even Cecilia, her stepsister, started a school for girls back in Boston. She wrote that Lydia had been her inspiration. "Will you ever see her again?" Samuel asked. "Maybe," Lydia said, "when we are different people than we were back then." 5 years after being sent to Colorado as a cruel joke, Lydia stood before her school. It was thriving. Her work had inspired new laws and programs clear across the country. But what mattered most were the women she had helped, hundreds of them, all building their own lives with skill and with confidence. Each one was proof of what happens when women are given a chance. Samuel walked up beside her barn. Elizabeth sat on his shoulders, chattering about 7 new kittens in the barn. "Can we keep them all, Mama?" Lydia just smiled and said, "We will see." She looked at her husband, her daughter, and the school they had built from ashes. "Do you ever regret it?" Samuel asked softly. "Leaving Boston behind?" Lydia thought for a moment. She thought about the 12 years of being made to feel small, like she was nothing. "I regret the cruelty that forced me here," she said at last. "But I do not regret a single thing that happened after I arrived. This," she said, waving her hand at it all, "is what I was meant to build." That night, she took out her mother's letter one last time. The message was simple. Build a life that is truly yours. Find folks who really see you. She had done just that. Victoria sent her away to be humiliated. Instead, Lydia had found everything that mattered: a good husband, a purpose, and freedom. The best revenge was not anger. It was living a life so full and happy that the cruelty of the past just faded away. Victoria thought she was destroying her, but all she did was set her free. Lydia was no longer the unwanted daughter. She was Lydia Elizabeth Crow. She was a wife, a mother, a teacher, and the one who built her own amazing life. That was more than revenge. That was victory. She stood at the window, looking out at the ranch she had built, the life she had claimed. A deep peace settled in her heart. The mountains watched, just as they always had. And in the glass, Lydia saw the reflection of a woman she finally knew. A woman who was strong and who was home.